but this book is also kind of looking back over a series of your writings about the climate, and I'm wondering what you think we, those of us who have written or been activists or scientists and have been engaged in this for 20, 30 years, did wrong along the way. Why has it taken so long to sort of, for this fire to ignite?
Yeah. We really want to look back. Is what did we do wrong? I mean, a lot. Would love to say a lot. You know, when I published This Changes Everything in 2014, I heard from a lot of people in the climate movement who would say to me, like, sotto voce, like, why are you making our jobs harder? Like, it's hard enough to fight climate change, why are you making it about capitalism, you know? And it wasn't like an intellectual argument. It wasn't like people were saying, like, no, I really think that infinite growth on a finite planet is like an okay thing. It was just like, you're making it less popular, you know? Like climate, I think a lot of people in the climate movement, this is one of the mistakes that was made. A lot of people in the climate movement, which is, with the exception of the climate justice movement, is a majority white middle class movement, had this idea that that everybody cares about the planet, but not everybody cares about racism, and not everybody cares about poverty. And so why would we weigh down our popular cause by linking it with these causes that were less popular? A lot of people thought that. And it was not only was it unethical because it is for people who are overwhelmingly people of color who are most vulnerable to climate disruption and all environmental vulnerabilities, but it was also strategically stupid because our enemies are fierce and they fight to win and they have limitless money. So we need a movement that's willing to fight. And the fact is that, Arundhati Roy, she puts it well. She says, the middle class environmental movement wants to figure out how to change without changing. They're always asking, how do we change without changing? And if you think about, the inconvenient truth framing of that era of the climate movement, it was like, everything is great except for the inconvenient problem that we're cooking the planet. So what is the least that we can do to address that problem? Because if you think things are basically okay, except for the problem of climate change, then you're going to be looking for the least that you can do. So you're looking at a carbon tax, you're looking at cap and trade, you're going to focus on consumer, so-called solutions. So I think the strategic failure of that was that, one, you don't have fighters in your movement because you don't have people who are fighting for their lives and are fighting, as I said, not just for a future that is not apocalyptic, but for a future that is better than life right now, right? And I mean, if you look at Standing Rock, look at how people fight when they're fighting for their kids and their water and their air. It's a completely different quality of the fight. And so there was that problem with it. But the other problem is that the kinds of solutions that emerged out of that mentality were within the framework of neoliberalism. And so they offloaded the cost of the transition onto working people who were simultaneously facing all of these other economic stresses, austerity, job precarity, and the rest of it that is just neoliberalism as usual. And so it leads to a backlash. So you look at what Macron did in France, he's an incredibly neoliberal president. He's giving tax breaks to millionaires and corporations. He's waging war on trade unions. He's imposing austerity, and he's asking working people to pay more for gas, as his climate policy. And it led to a massive revolt. But it's not the only place where this has happened. Like in Canada, climate action has, because it's been carbon, narrowly carbon focused, is associated with paying more for electricity, paying more for gas. And so, in Ontario, where we had carbon pricing, we now have our mini Donald Trump. We have have Doug Ford, the son of our crack-smoking mayor, who was elected promising to, the first thing he did was repeal our carbon pricing, and the second thing he did was repeal sex education, you know? So it's bad strategy, and these guys are constantly, and they are all guys, are constantly pretending that they're being strategic, you know, and I'm still getting lectured about this now, around, you know, basically we can't afford justice right now. We'll just, you know, we'll just do carbon pricing and then we'll worry about all these other problems. And I just don't understand why this is going to work now when it hasn't worked. It has not worked. It hasn't worked. It hasn't been enough in California. It hasn't been enough anywhere that has tried this sort of narrow carbon pricing approach. So I think that's the biggest mistake that we make.
So you lay out that you think the vision of the Green New Deal framework is that we can couple the sort of massive infrastructure and other decarbonize the economy while pairing that with things like universal health care and jobs guarantee, so that there's this justice component baked in, and you have a broader constituency of people who are in this for kind of a variety of reasons.
Right, so like I think what is different about the Green New Deal is that it isn't a singular policy. It's a framework for governing. It is a vision for the next economy, in the same way that the New Deal was not, you know, one thing FDR did. It was the umbrella under which the U.S. economy was transformed over a decade, right? And so, you know, personally, I think that there's still, like my criticism of the New Deal resolution, like the AOC and Markey's resolution, is actually that it's not broad enough. It doesn't have anything on migration. It doesn't have anything really on foreign policy and the military. So I think the more holistic it becomes, and this is sort of like our current system is crashing. What's the system upgrade? What's the next system? Then we won't be afraid of adding things, because the point is that it's not a policy, it's a framework, it's a vision, it's holistic. And I think we're really out of practice of, you know, in thinking in that way, because we have decades of thinking about issues and silos and very, you know, compartmentalized ways of thinking about change, right? We separate racial justice from economic justice, from women's rights, from environment. The right has a holistic vision. Like they want to screw everyone over, right? And they get really rich profit. But like, I don't know, but I mean, like, it's interesting. Like this thing of chopping up everything into issues is it's a particular phenomenon on the left that I think has a lot to do with donation funding.
But even if you have a holistic vision, at some point that has to be reified in some form of legislation.
Right, but I think the reason why it's useful to sort of conjure up the original New Deal is because that was Social Security, unemployment insurance, breaking up the banks, the Civilian Conservation Corps planting 2.3 billion trees. It was multiple relief agencies. It was a revolution in funding for the arts. And it had huge areas that were missing. I mean, African American workers were excluded, domestic workers were excluded, agricultural workers were excluded. There was systematic discrimination in the southern states, you know, in terms of who got the relief. I mean, I could go on and on about all of that, but it was like, it's not a policy. It's the new way of working. It's the vision. We need to get to 100% renewable energy, and we're going to multitask and fix a whole lot of other crises.
And I must confess that my American Studies days are far in the distance, so I'm trying to remember the order in which FDR did those things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an idea for literally like which would come first? What's the best way to get the ball rolling?
Yeah. I mean, I know he launched the Civilian Conservation Corps within a couple months. He was rolling it out. There were certain things that had been tried in New York State, so I think something that's really interesting to think about is what the states that have, you know, supposed climate champions at the helm are going to do to kind of get this ready, because a lot of what FDR was able to do quickly, he was able to do because he tried as governor of New York State. state. And so what's stopping California from having a Green New Deal, before? I was just in Seattle, and Seattle's got a really bunch of great progressive democratic socialists on council, and they passed a resolution to bring a Green New Deal to Seattle. I think what was cool about the original New Deal was to sort of throw everything at the wall and see what sort of sticks. I think one thing we really have to be serious about is making sure that we keep ourselves honest on the carbon, because we really do need to radically lower carbon. And some of the things I'm worried about is, you have a jobs guarantee and a jobs boom and a huge infrastructure boom. If you don't do this right, you can actually end up increasing emissions by mistake. So this needs to be, there needs to be a carbon audit as part of this.
It's interesting you said that FDR tried stuff out in New York and he was sort of ready to go, because in the shock doctrine you wrote a lot about how when disaster capitalism would happen when there was a shock and there were already these pre-existing plans, and those were sort of rolled out, be it in Chile or New Orleans or wherever. So is that in some ways the way you see the Green New Deal and maybe the more specific versions of pieces of it that are underway as sort of plans ready to go for 2020, we know?
Oh yes, I do. Everything I've done since the shock doctrine has been about trying to figure out how disasters are not exploited by these sociopaths to further, to further loot the public sphere. But what's interesting is, when I was researching the shock doctrine, and I talk about this in the book, the reason why Milton Friedman was obsessed with crisis, right? And I use that Milton Friedman quote ad infinitum: only a crisis, actual perceived, produces real change. When that change happens, the change depends on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to keep the ideas ready and available until the politically impossible becomes politically inevitable, right? So, don't cheer for Milton Friedman. The reason he was obsessed with crisis and having ideas ready is because Milton Friedman believed, and he wrote this in a letter to Pinochet, that everything went wrong in your country and mine. This is a quote. In the 1930s, when people got the idea that they could do good things with other people's money, he was referring to the New Deal. So what he understood, and what all the Chicago School economists understood, is that when capitalism produces crises, it naturally lends itself to progressive breakthroughs. It's only logical, right? If capitalism is producing these crises, then people are going to want to change the system. Sarkozy was reading Das Kapital after the financial crash in 2008. This is the way people logically respond when capitalism produces crises that create massive misery. Let's have a different system. They were so afraid that the cyclical crises created by capitalism would produce these lurches to the left that they were so opposed to, that they developed the whole think tank infrastructure in order to have their ideas ready, so that the crises wouldn't move society's left, right? And so this is why it kind of comes back to what I was starting to say about foundation funding and this kind of kind of a red scare in this country, where you're not actually supposed to talk about ideology, ideas, worldview. You're just supposed to talk about issues. Is that it's put the left in a situation where we don't have ideas ready for when crises are produced. The right does. They have their think tank infrastructure to be ready while New Orleans is still underwater. I quoted it in the shock doctrine: 32 free market solutions for Hurricane Katrina. They have the same ones for Hurricane Maria. It's easy to have your ideas ready when you literally only have a few ideas, and you just put the same ones forward no matter what the crisis is, right? Privatize the school system, get rid of public housing, public education. So they're afraid of this. This is why they have the shock doctrine. So I guess I'm just saying that it's not that this isn't me imitating the shock doctrine. The whole right-wing shock doctrine, technique was about fear of precisely this, like that societies would democratically demand better when capitalism produces these types of crises. And unfortunately, for a long time, this sort of ideological timidity on the left meant that when these crises were produced, there was a fear of putting these ideas forward. And this is what makes me hopeful right now about the fact that we are talking about a holistic alternative and vision that is forward-looking. This is we're not in the situation we were with like Occupy Wall Street or the Arab Spring or the movement of the squares, where you would have these sort of effervescent moments of political uprising, but when it came to like, okay, what's our plan? What are we going to do? There really wasn't one, and that opening was exploited by really regressive forces around the world. And so that's the game changer of the Green New Deal, is that we have our ideas ready finally, again.
You're obviously a critic of corporate power. I'm wondering what, if any, role of the corporations would have. Is there a way to jujitsu corporate power to kind of put them to good use, to get Raytheon to stop building bombs and get them to start building, part of the decarbonization effort? Or is this War Powers Act, nationalizing some of these companies? How do you see that? Literally, who's going to make the stuff that we need?
Right, interesting. Well, look, I think a lot of money from the military is going to have to be moved to this. One of the really interesting things about the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was one of the most popular New Deal programs, and this is something that's worth remembering, is that in the 1930s, the U.S. was in its most profound economic crisis in history, but it was also in its most profound ecological crisis because of the Dust Bowl and deforestation. And so that was why they created the Civilian Conservation Corps, because they needed to do massive reforestation and they needed to address soil erosion. And so if you look at where FDR put the civilian conservation camps, there were hundreds of them across the U.S., he seemingly deliberately put them in parts of the country that didn't vote for him, in rural areas that had voted Republican. And a lot of those areas flipped. So, I think it's an interesting, in terms of thinking about, how you roll this out, how you build support for it, because a lot of communities in this country are dependent on bases for their income. So I do think, I don't think Raytheon should do carbon capture storage, but I do think that we should be thinking about citing some really key projects in areas that are really dependent on the military. And we have to be very thoughtful that that's part of a just transition, absolutely. In terms of the role of the corporate sector, I'm not saying we can't do anything without abolishing capitalism, but I am saying that we have to take a whole lot out of the market in order to move as quickly as we need to. Something like public transit. If we want people to use it, the best way to have people use public transit is to make it free. They do that in some European cities, and Paris does it whenever they have an air quality crisis and they want to get cars off the road. They make the metro free, and lo and behold, everyone uses it. So there aren't market solutions for something like that. But one thing I've been really excited about is I'm quite cynical, it is true, about the idea that corporations are going to voluntarily sort of green themselves. And they've been talking about this for a long time. I've been following it for a long time. One thing I'm not cynical about is what's happening right now with tech worker organizing. Because it's happened quite quickly, but just in the past year, we've seen 20,000 Google workers walk off the job. It was catalyzed around sexual harassment, but it wasn't only about sexual harassment. It was also about not wanting to do contracts with the Pentagon. There's a whole tech won't build it movement. There's tech workers organizing to prevent their companies from working with ICE. And now we have Amazon workers for climate justice. 1,500 of them joined the global climate strike. Microsoft workers also, I don't know how many, but a lot. Google as well. And the tech workers that are getting some real concessions out of these companies. They've never had walkouts like this before. Amazon just announced that they're buying 100,000 electric vehicles for their fleets. They've massively increased their ambition around their use of renewable energy. And so I think this is worker organizing. I do believe in worker power. I don't believe in sort of corporate usurism. And I think it's very important.
Fox News went on the offensive against the Green New Deal early and hard. There's a lot of talk about no more cows and no more airplanes. And it's Data for Progress released some results today, which were on the one hand really encouraging that once people were explained, once the Green New Deal and similar programs were explained to them, they were tended to generally be in favor. But a lot of the initial impression they had was really quite bad. How can the proponents of this kind of change to our economy and our system of living better message? Is this activist? Is it the Democratic Party? Like, what is the... We kind of need a better elevator pitch, I feel like.
Yeah, but I think, what I think Data for Progress also did, or somebody did some research showing that Fox News talks about the Green New Deal more than twice as much as MSNBC talks about the Green New Deal. So they're defining it, right? And liberals are kind of running away from it. And so there isn't we don't know what it would look like if Fox News was attacking the Green New Deal and the New York Times was talking about how good it was, and MSNBC was actually letting people explain, for more than Chris Hayes did a great town hall, but it was one town hall about the Green New Deal, right? So we really, what tends to happen is liberals get spooked really easily. It starts to get attacked, and then it's like, oh, it's toxic, let's not talk about it unless we're asked, And that makes no sense.
I think that's true, but there's also a structural problem where Fox News is essentially a propaganda shop, and the other things that you've mentioned are journalism shops, and their priorities are different.
That doesn't explain why, the New York Times ran 15 op-eds attacking the Green New Deal as going too far.
Well, I don't know if you think that's what the New York Times is doing.
No, but it's true. It hasn't gotten a fair shake in liberal media because it's not liberal. Get a lot more creative about thinking about how we get this out. We need to work with artists. We also just need to organize, right? So it's exciting that that tech workers are starting to talk about what would a Green New Deal for tech look like? We've got farmers organizing, what would agriculture for a Green New Deal look like? We need teachers, the National Nurses United just endorsed it, and they're going to be doing some work on what a Green New Deal for healthcare looks like. And so I think if we can go deep in these sectors, it'll build support, because I don't think we're going to get the media space to actually explore this. But we also have to be really creative, work around it. I mean, that one video we did, we got 10 million views in a week, and none of us have ever seen it. But it's one video. And they talk about the Green New Deal and lie about the Green New Deal nonstop on Fox.
So you made the point in the book that the great taboo in North America was that you have to change your individual life. you talked about this. But the flip side of that has to do with the sort of organizing. Is it in opposition to individual change? How does one feed the other? I have a note from a high school teacher who wants to know how she gets her students to think beyond just light bulbs and into organizing, but then other folks want to know what can they individually do in addition to organizing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I mean, those are great questions. And I think we know the things that we can individually do to lower our carbon footprint. We all know what they are, right? I mean, eat less meat, fly less, drive less, and generally shop less, if we're over consumers. 70% of emissions come from the top 20 consumers. Everybody in this room is in the top 20% of consumers in the world. But I do feel that this focus on our individual behavior I think that it's something that we should do to close the sense of cognitive dissonance in our lives. I think it's something we should do because, in a lot of cases, it'll probably make us happier and healthier. The things that are good for the planet tend to be good for our health, because we're part of the planet and that whole thing. But I really do think that the obsession with individual action ultimately becomes disempowering. Like, we cannot do this. And so, I think a big part of the reason why it's good to try doing the things that actually lower our carbon emissions is that it kind of gets us out of the mindset that it's the end of the world, right? Which is what you're hearing. It's like, if we do this, our quality of life is going to plummet. That's not true. So it's good to know that in your bones.
And you're supporting changes too, right?
Yeah, but I also think we have so much we have so much big picture policy work and organizing work that we should also kind of let ourselves off the hook a little bit. And I think it's in terms of the answer for the teacher. I don't know. I think students are figuring out what to do beyond recycling and that does the individual behavior. I mean, they're organizing strikes. They're finding their political power together. I have found this question ever since the first book I wrote, No Logo. It was like a critique of the global trading system and sweatshops, and every speech would end with people asking you for shopping advice. And so I sort of feel like I've been spent the past 20 years just sort of explaining to people that I'm not actually their personal shopping advisor, and that we all need to start realizing that we're more powerful. This is a product of neoliberal capitalism, that we think of ourselves as consumers first, and we see that as our primary sphere of power as opposed to what we can do together, which is so much more.
Which Democratic candidates do you think have the best climate plans? Or what do you like or dislike in a couple of them?
Yeah, so I think that Warren adopted a lot of Jay Inslee's plan, which is a plan that was informed by some really great climate justice organizers in Washington State who had pushed Inslee, who had originally proposed a really regressive carbon tax, and eventually they got him to propose a really progressive carbon tax that was designed by frontline communities. It ended up getting defeated in the ballot measure, but the Inslee plan is good in a lot of areas, and Warren has adopted a lot of that. Bernie's Green New Deal plan is, to me, light years better than I'm saying this because I think all of the candidates should up your game. Bernie is the only one who is talking about, you can't talk about climate justice within the borders of the United States. The U.S. is the world's largest historical emitter. Bernie is the only candidate who is talking about spending serious money to transfer resources to the global south. He's talking about spending $200 billion, and that money doesn't come from nowhere. He's worked with the world's leading emission reduction specialists about what the U.S.'s actual share of the pie is. And they come up with that number, and it comes from people who I know very well and respect very much. And this is money that would go into the UN Climate Fund, which itself isn't perfect, but it would be the money that would help countries leapfrog over fossil fuels, protect their forests, protect themselves from storms. Climate justice also means opening our borders. That's the other thing. People have a right to private financing, and they also have a right to move to safety. We should talk about the attacks on TPS and where that fits in, because I think the Trump administration's attacks on TPS have a lot to do with closing like the one loophole that was allowing climate refugees to come to the U.S., and they've been very systematic in attacking TPS, I think for that reason, because they understand that. So Bernie's plan is, to me, light years better because of that climate financing piece, because he's talking about cutting military spending. Warren is talking about greening the military, which is the part of the Warren plan that I have the most trouble with. You can't green the U.S. military. The U.S. military is the world's largest driver of ecological devastation around the world. I don't like the frame of economic patriotism that she's using around the Green New Deal, because the truth is, this can't just be about the U.S. rebuilding its manufacturing sector at the expense of other countries and dumping like cheap solar panels on the developing world. That's economic imperialism. And what countries deserve is the right to develop. Every country in the world should be developing their own green tech. And so I think there's too much nationalism in some of the ways that the Green New Deal is being discussed. But I think we're way better than where we were a few months ago. And I think that these campaigns are porous, and they're being pushed by movements, and they're going to get better. But I worry about the sort of over-nationalistic frame that some people are using around the Green New Deal, just because there's this idea that, like, well, the U.S. is going to do a lot of good green things, and that's going to inspire other countries. It doesn't work that way. Like, not after this many years of the U.S. not, sabotaging UN climate negotiations. So what the U.S. actually needs to do is pay up.
Can the Green New Deal, or any of the other left's big plans pass without getting rid of the filibuster?
I don't think so. I mean, I think parts of it can.
Yeah.
There are parts of it can be done with executive authority, but parts of it can't. So, yeah.
Do you have insight why Bernie's holding off on that one?
I don't have any insight.
Yeah. It seems out of character.
Clarified a little bit about it, but I can't speak for the campaign. I'm not a surrogate. I just think he has a better Green New Deal plan.
So you said that leftists of our generation were so suspicious of electoral politics that we lost opportunities. Do you think millennials and Gen Z have learned that lesson?
Do I think
that they have embraced getting into electoral politics or driving electoral politics, not just,
Yeah, I think that this generation of young people is way more mature than we were. I think we didn't want to get our hands dirty with it, and we sort of made a fetish of a lot of really chaotic stuff. And I think, I'm incredibly impressed with the sort of moral seriousness that Sunrise is bringing to this fight, and just, it's not electoral politics instead of movement building, it's both. It's that pincer, and it's beautiful. It works. I don't know why we didn't get that. So.
Can we transition to a decarbonized economy without nuclear power?
Sure. Yeah.
So Yes, we can do this with renewable energy, but I don't like personally.
Existing.
Yeah, so personally, I would sequence it. So I would prioritize rolling out the new infrastructure should be sun, wind, wave. There's no need for nuclear. It's more expensive. It's slower. It lends itself to centralization, whereas what's beautiful about renewables is that if we can have energy democracy, if we can community owned and controlled, frontline communities can own their own renewable energy project, we can democratize our economy at the same time. And I think the fetish for nuclear just comes from this same idea that it's sort of easier to sort of stick with the same centralized structures. But it's built on the same sacrifice zone mentality. I mean, who's going to eat the risk? Who's going to deal with the waste? Who's going to deal with the mining? And I know there's like next-gen nuclear that supposedly doesn't have any of these problems, but that isn't what we're talking about. That's not ready. We're talking about the same old nuclear and with the same old risks. But do I think we should simultaneously dismantle existing nuclear and fossil fuel infrastructure? I think with the exception of very old and dangerous plants, that seems to me to be an unnecessary added burden.
Are we, the Green New Deal is very focused on kind of healing the traditional green versus labor divide, it seems. And